The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace as Thomas Mitchell adjusted his uniform for what he thought would be another routine day. At 28 years old, he had been working as a palace guard for nearly 6 years, and the grandeur of the royal residence had become as familiar to him as his own modest flat in South London. His weathered hands smoothed down his perfectly pressed jacket as he prepared for his shift, unaware that this particular Tuesday would forever change the course of his life. Thomas had always been a man of simple pleasures and honest work. Growing up in a working-class family in Bermondsey, he had learned the value of dedication and integrity from his father, who worked as a mechanic, and his mother, who cleaned offices in the early hours of the morning. When the opportunity arose to work at the palace, his parents had been overwhelmed with pride. Their son would be protecting the Queen herself, they told their neighbors with barely contained excitement. The palace corridors were already bustling with activity as Thomas made his way to the security briefing room. The upcoming coronation ceremony had everyone on edge, from the highest-ranking officials to the newest staff members. Queen Elizabeth had recently ascended to the throne following her father's unexpected passing, and the nation was preparing for a celebration that would be watched by millions around the world. During the morning briefing, Superintendent Williams outlined the day's assignments with his usual stern efficiency. The man was in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. He had been working palace security for over 20 years and commanded respect from every guard under his supervision. "Mitchell," Superintendent Williams called out, consulting his clipboard. "You'll be assigned to the private wing today. We've had reports of some unusual activity near the Queen's quarters, and we need someone reliable to investigate." Thomas nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. The private wing was rarely accessible to guards of his rank, and he wondered what kind of unusual activity could possibly warrant investigation. As the other guards dispersed to their various posts, Superintendent Williams approached him with additional instructions. "Listen carefully, Mitchell," the superintendent said in a low voice. "There have been reports of strange sounds coming from the Queen's wardrobe room late at night. The staff are getting nervous, and we can't afford any disruptions with the coronation approaching. I want you to conduct a thorough but discreet investigation. Check every corner, every hidden space, but be absolutely respectful of Her Majesty's personal belongings." The responsibility felt enormous as Thomas made his way through the ornate hallways toward the private wing. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing patterns on the richly carpeted floors, and portraits of past monarchs seemed to watch his every step. He had walked these halls many times before, but never with such a specific and delicate mission. The Queen's wardrobe room was located in a section of the palace that most people never saw. It was accessible through a series of interconnected chambers, each more opulent than the last. As Thomas approached the ornate door, he noticed how quiet this part of the palace was compared to the bustling public areas. The silence was almost overwhelming, broken only by the soft ticking of an antique clock somewhere in the distance. Taking a deep breath, Thomas inserted the key that Superintendent Williams had provided and slowly opened the door. The sight that greeted him was nothing short of magnificent. The wardrobe room was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling wooden cabinets lined with silk and velvet. Hundreds of dresses, gowns, and formal outfits hung in perfect order, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship and design. The room smelled of lavender and cedar, with hints of expensive perfume that seemed to linger in the air. Natural light streamed through tall windows, illuminating the rich fabrics and creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. Thomas had never seen such luxury concentrated in one space, and for a moment, he simply stood in the doorway, trying to process the magnificence before him. As he began his investigation, Thomas moved carefully between the rows of clothing, checking for any signs of disturbance or unusual activity. Everything appeared to be in perfect order, with each garment properly spaced and meticulously maintained. He examined the locks on the cabinets, tested the security of the windows, and searched for any possible entry points that an intruder might have used. It was while checking behind a particularly large wardrobe that Thomas first noticed something odd. There was a section of the wall that seemed slightly different from the rest, as if it had been recently disturbed. The wallpaper pattern didn't quite align, and when he pressed against it gently, he could feel a slight give that suggested there might be something behind it. His heart began to race as he realized he might have discovered something significant. Following proper protocol, he should have immediately reported his findings to Superintendent Williams, but his curiosity got the better of him. The coronation was only weeks away, and any potential security breach needed to be thoroughly investigated. Using a small penknife from his pocket, Thomas carefully probed the edges of the suspicious wall section. To his amazement, he discovered that it was actually a cleverly concealed panel that had been recently opened. Behind the panel was a narrow space, just large enough for a person to hide, and within that space was something that made his blood run cold. Wrapped in protective cloth was an outfit that was clearly intended for the coronation ceremony. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with intricate beadwork and embroidery that must have taken months to complete. But this wasn't just any outfit. This was clearly meant to be worn by the Queen herself during the most important ceremony of her reign. As Thomas carefully examined the hidden garments, he began to understand the gravity of his discovery. This wasn't simply a case of misplaced royal clothing. The outfit had been deliberately concealed, and its presence in this hidden compartment suggested something far more sinister than a simple administrative error. The coronation dress was breathtaking in its beauty, but there was something about it that made Thomas uneasy. The fabric seemed to shimmer in the light, and the intricate patterns seemed almost hypnotic. As he looked more closely, he began to notice details that seemed somehow wrong, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what was bothering him. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Thomas as he realized that he was possibly the only person who knew about this discovery. Whatever was happening, it was clearly connected to the upcoming coronation, and the implications could be enormous. The safety of the Queen herself might be at stake, and he was the only one who could act on this information. Carefully rewrapping the outfit, Thomas made the decision to remove it from its hiding place. He couldn't leave something so potentially dangerous in the Queen's private quarters, but he also couldn't risk carrying it through the palace corridors where other staff might see him. The situation required careful planning and absolute discretion. As he prepared to leave the wardrobe room, Thomas took one last look around to ensure he hadn't missed anything important. The magnificence of the space seemed even more pronounced now, knowing that it had been harboring such a mysterious secret. He locked the door behind him and began the nerve-wracking journey back to the security office, the hidden outfit carefully concealed in a protective bag. The walk back through the palace corridors felt like it took hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. Every footstep seemed to echo louder than usual, and Thomas found himself glancing nervously at every person he passed. He was carrying something that could potentially change the course of history, and the weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. When he finally reached the security office, Superintendent Williams was reviewing paperwork at his desk. The older man looked up with interest as Thomas entered, clearly expecting a routine report about the investigation. "Well, Mitchell, what did you find? I trust everything was in order in Her Majesty's wardrobe room." Thomas took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would set in motion events that none of them could predict. The outfit in his bag seemed to pulse with significance, and he realized that his life as a simple palace guard was about to become much more complicated. "Sir," Thomas began, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I'm afraid I've discovered something that requires your immediate attention, something that could have serious implications for the coronation ceremony." The expression on Superintendent Williams' face changed immediately from casual interest to sharp focus. Years of experience in palace security had taught him to recognize when a situation was potentially serious, and the tone in Thomas's voice told him that this was one of those moments. "Show me," the superintendent said simply, rising from his desk and moving toward the secure examination room where sensitive discoveries could be properly investigated. As Thomas carefully unwrapped the mysterious outfit, he couldn't help but feel that he was about to uncover secrets that went far deeper than he had initially imagined. The beautiful garments seemed to hold stories within their intricate patterns, and he had the distinct feeling that his discovery was only the beginning of a much larger mystery. The coronation was approaching quickly, and time was running short. Whatever was happening, whatever conspiracy or plot the hidden outfit represented, it would need to be unraveled quickly if they were to protect the Queen and ensure the ceremony proceeded safely. Thomas looked at the magnificent garments spread before them and wondered what other secrets the palace might be hiding. His simple life as a guard had just become infinitely more complex, and he had the unsettling feeling that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The discovery in the Queen's wardrobe had opened a door to a world of intrigue, and danger that he had never imagined existed within the walls of the palace he had sworn to protect. Superintendent Williams examined the mysterious outfit with the methodical precision of a man who had spent decades dealing with palace security. His weathered hands moved carefully over the intricate beadwork and embroidery, his experienced eyes noting details that would escape the attention of most people. The silence in the secure examination room was heavy with tension as both men contemplated the implications of Thomas's discovery. "This is extraordinary craftsmanship," the superintendent murmured, lifting a section of the elaborate train to examine it more closely. "The quality is absolutely impeccable, certainly worthy of a royal coronation. But the question is, why was it hidden away like that?" Thomas watched nervously as his superior continued the examination. The outfit seemed even more magnificent under the bright lights of the examination room, and he found himself almost mesmerized by the way the fabric seemed to catch and reflect light in unexpected ways. There was something about the garments that seemed almost alive, as if they were waiting for their moment to fulfill some greater purpose. "Sir," Thomas ventured, "do you think this could be some kind of backup outfit? Perhaps something that was prepared in case the official coronation dress was damaged or lost?" Superintendent Williams shook his head slowly, his expression growing more concerned with each passing moment. "No, Mitchell. I've been involved in the planning for this coronation for months, and I can assure you that this outfit is not part of any official preparations. The Queen's coronation dress is being created by the royal dressmakers under the strictest security, and every aspect of its design has been carefully documented and approved." The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air between them. If the hidden outfit was not an official part of the coronation preparations, then its presence in the Queen's wardrobe room suggested something far more troubling. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand just how serious their discovery might be. "What do you think we should do, sir?" Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing anxiety he felt. Before Superintendent Williams could answer, there was a soft knock on the examination room door. Both men froze, instinctively moving to shield the mysterious outfit from view. The superintendent quickly threw a protective cloth over the garments before calling out for the visitor to enter. The door opened to reveal Margaret Hartley, the Queen's senior lady-in-waiting, a distinguished woman in her 50s who had served the royal family for over 20 years. She was known throughout the palace for her discretion, efficiency, and unwavering loyalty to the crown. Her presence in the security office was unusual, and both men immediately recognized that something important was happening. "Gentlemen," Margaret said, her cultured voice carrying a note of urgency, "I apologize for the interruption, but I've been sent to inquire about the investigation in Her Majesty's wardrobe room. There are certain concerns that need to be addressed immediately." Superintendent Williams exchanged a meaningful glance with Thomas before responding. "Mrs. Hartley, your timing is actually quite fortuitous. We've made a discovery that requires immediate attention from the highest levels of palace administration." Margaret's expression shifted from polite inquiry to sharp attention. Years of serving in the royal household had taught her to recognize when situations were potentially serious, and the tone in the superintendent's voice told her that this was one of those moments. "I see," she said carefully. "Perhaps you could show me what you've found." With careful deliberation, Superintendent Williams removed the protective cloth, revealing the magnificent coronation outfit. Margaret's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face went pale, and she took an involuntary step backward, one hand rising to her throat in a gesture of shock. "Where exactly did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas recounted the story of his investigation, describing in detail how he had discovered the hidden panel and the careful way the outfit had been concealed. As he spoke, he watched Margaret's expression carefully, noting the way her eyes widened with what appeared to be recognition and fear. "This is impossible," Margaret said finally, moving closer to examine the garments more carefully. "This outfit, I've seen it before, or rather I've seen the designs for it." Both men waited expectantly as Margaret continued her examination. Her hands moved over the fabric with the familiarity of someone who understood the intricacies of royal fashion and ceremonial dress. When she looked up, her expression was grave. "Gentlemen, what you've discovered here is far more significant than you might realize. These garments were designed specifically for the coronation ceremony, but they were never supposed to be created. The designs were rejected months ago for reasons that I am not at liberty to discuss. The mystery was deepening rather than being solved, and Thomas felt a growing sense of unease. If the outfit had been officially rejected, how had it come to be created with such extraordinary attention to detail? And why had someone gone to such lengths to hide it within the Queen's own wardrobe room? Mrs. Hartley, Superintendent Williams said carefully, I think it's time we brought this matter to the attention of the palace's senior security officials. If someone has been operating outside official channels to create unauthorized royal garments, we could be looking at a serious security breach. Margaret nodded gravely, but her expression suggested that she knew more about the situation than she was willing to reveal immediately. Yes, I agree completely, but before we proceed, I think there are certain individuals who need to be informed discreetly. This matter touches on some very sensitive aspects of the coronation preparations. As they discussed the next steps, Thomas found himself studying the mysterious outfit more closely. There was something about the patterns in the embroidery that seemed almost hypnotic, and the more he looked at them, the more he became convinced that they were telling some kind of story. The intricate designs seemed to flow and connect in ways that suggested they were more than merely decorative. Mrs. Hartley, Thomas said, interrupting the conversation between the two senior officials, can you tell us anything about the symbolism in these patterns? They seem unusually complex, almost like they're conveying some kind of message. Margaret moved closer to examine the embroidery that Thomas was indicating. As she studied the intricate patterns, her expression grew even more troubled. You have excellent observation skills, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, these patterns are definitely telling a story, but it's not the story that should be told during a coronation ceremony. She traced some of the patterns with her finger, following the flow of the design across the fabric. Traditional coronation embroidery celebrates the continuity of the monarchy, the blessings of God, and the hope for a prosperous reign. But these patterns, they seem to be telling a different story entirely. The revelation sent a chill through the room. If the embroidery contained unauthorized or inappropriate symbolism, it suggested that whoever had created the outfit had very specific intentions that went far beyond simply creating beautiful clothing for a royal ceremony. What kind of story do you think they're telling? Superintendent Williams asked, his voice tense with concern. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying the patterns with the intensity of someone trying to decode a complex puzzle. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with implications. Without conducting a thorough analysis, I can't be certain, but some of these symbols appear to be related to historical challenges to royal authority. There are patterns here that reference moments of crisis in the monarchy's past, times when the legitimacy of the crown was questioned or threatened. The significance of this revelation was staggering. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to create an outfit that appeared to be intended for the Queen's coronation, but which actually contained symbolic challenges to her authority. The implications for the security of the ceremony and the safety of the Queen herself were enormous. Thomas felt his heart racing as he began to understand the full scope of what they had discovered. This wasn't simply a case of unauthorized clothing creation. This was potentially an elaborate plot to undermine or sabotage the coronation ceremony itself. We need to find out who created this outfit, Superintendent Williams said firmly. And we need to understand how they gained access to the Queen's private quarters to hide it. Margaret nodded in agreement, but her expression suggested that she was already formulating plans that went beyond simple investigation. Yes, but we also need to consider the timing. The coronation is less than 3 weeks away, and if this represents part of a larger plot, we may not have much time to uncover the full scope of the threat. As they prepared to expand their investigation, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were only seeing the tip of a much larger iceberg. The hidden outfit was clearly the work of someone with extraordinary skill and detailed knowledge of royal protocols and traditions. Creating something of this quality would have required months of work, access to expensive materials, and intimate knowledge of the Queen's measurements and preferences. The questions were multiplying faster than the answers. Who had the resources and expertise to create such an elaborate outfit? How had they gained access to rejected coronation designs? And most troubling of all, what was their ultimate objective in placing these controversial garments in the Queen's wardrobe room? I think, Margaret said slowly, that we need to begin by examining the palace staff records for anyone who might have the skills and access necessary to accomplish something like this. We're looking for someone with expertise in royal fashion, intimate knowledge of palace layout and security, and the ability to work on a project of this magnitude without detection. Superintendent Williams was already making notes, his military training evident in the systematic way he approached the problem. We'll also need to review security footage for the past several months, focusing on anyone who had access to the Queen's private quarters. And we'll need to do all of this without alerting whoever is responsible that we've discovered their work. The weight of responsibility was enormous. They were potentially dealing with a threat to one of the most important ceremonies in British history, and the margin for error was essentially zero. Thomas looked at the beautiful but sinister outfit spread before them and wondered what other secrets might be hidden within the walls of the palace. As the three of them prepared to leave the examination room, each with specific tasks to accomplish, Thomas couldn't help but feel that his discovery had set in motion events that would change everything. The simple life of a palace guard was becoming increasingly complex, and he had the distinct feeling that the most challenging and dangerous aspects of this mystery were still ahead of them. The coronation outfit that had been hidden so carefully in the Queen's wardrobe was just the beginning. Somewhere within the palace, someone was working to undermine the very foundations of the monarchy, and it was up to them to uncover the plot before it could succeed. The investigation that followed Thomas's discovery moved with the quiet efficiency that characterized all serious security matters within the palace. Over the next 48 hours, a small team of trusted individuals worked around the clock to unravel the mystery of the hidden coronation outfit. What they discovered was far more complex and troubling than anyone had initially imagined. Margaret Hartley had spent most of the previous night in the palace archives, carefully reviewing employment records and cross-referencing them with access logs for the Queen's private quarters. Her years of experience in palace administration proved invaluable as she identified a pattern that had previously gone unnoticed by security personnel. "Gentlemen," she announced as she entered the secure conference room where Thomas and Superintendent Williams were waiting, "I believe I've identified our suspect." She spread several files across the conference table, each one meticulously organized and annotated. The documents painted a picture of someone who had been planning this elaborate deception for months, possibly even years. "Eleanor Whitmore," Margaret announced, pointing to a professional photograph attached to one of the files. "She joined the palace staff 8 months ago as an assistant to the royal dressmakers. Her credentials were impeccable. She had worked for several high-end fashion houses in London and Paris, and her references were glowing." Thomas studied the photograph carefully. Eleanor Whitmore appeared to be a woman in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional style and intelligent eyes that seemed to hold secrets. There was something about her expression that made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite identify what it was. "What made you suspect her specifically?" Superintendent Williams asked, reviewing the employment documentation with his characteristic attention to detail. Margaret pulled out a series of access logs that showed when different staff members had entered various parts of the palace. "The timing patterns are what caught my attention. Eleanor had legitimate reasons to be in the Queen's wardrobe room as part of her duties with the dressmaking team, but she was also accessing areas during off hours when she should have been at home." The evidence was compelling, but it was what Margaret revealed next that truly shocked both men. "I also discovered that Eleanor Whitmore is not her real name. The woman we knew by that identity is actually Eleanor Blackwood, and she has connections to a group of political dissidents who have been monitoring royal activities for several years." The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. A political dissident had been working within the palace for months, with access to some of the most sensitive areas of the royal residence. The security implications were staggering, and he felt a deep sense of personal failure that he and his colleagues had not identified the threat sooner. "What do we know about this dissident group?" Thomas asked, trying to process the enormity of the situation. Superintendent Williams had been making phone calls while Margaret conducted her research, and his expression was grim as he shared what he had learned. "According to our contacts in MI5, the group calls itself the Commonwealth Liberation Front. They're not violent terrorists, but they are dedicated to what they call exposing the illegitimate foundations of monarchical power." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together in a way that made the hidden coronation outfit seem even more sinister. This wasn't simply a case of unauthorized clothing creation. It was part of a carefully planned political operation designed to undermine the coronation ceremony itself. Their plan appears to be quite sophisticated, Margaret continued, referring to additional documents she had obtained through discreet inquiries. By creating an outfit that looked legitimate but contained subversive symbolic elements, they may have been planning to somehow substitute it for the real coronation dress at the last moment. Thomas tried to imagine the chaos that would have ensued if such a plan had succeeded. The coronation ceremony would be broadcast to millions of people around the world, and any symbolic challenge to royal authority would be witnessed by an enormous audience. The damage to the monarchy's reputation could have been incalculable. "Where is Eleanor Whitmore now?" Thomas asked, realizing that they needed to act quickly if they were going to prevent any additional elements of the plot from being implemented. Superintendent Williams consulted his notes, his expression growing more concerned. "That's part of our problem. She hasn't reported for work in 2 days, and her lodgings in South Kensington appear to have been abandoned. It seems that she may have realized that her activities were being discovered and decided to disappear." The prospect that their primary suspect had escaped was deeply troubling, but Margaret had one more piece of information that provided both hope and additional concern. "However, I don't think she was working alone. The creation of that coronation outfit would have required assistance from other members of the dressmaking team, and I suspect there may be additional conspirators still working within the palace." This revelation meant that their investigation was far from over. In fact, it was possible that removing Eleanor Whitmore from the equation had only eliminated one element of a larger network of individuals working to undermine the coronation ceremony. "We need to identify and neutralize any remaining conspirators before they can implement whatever backup plans they might have," Superintendent Williams said, his military background evident in his strategic thinking. Over the following days, the investigation expanded to include a thorough review of every staff member who had any connection to the coronation preparations. What they discovered was a web of relationships and connections that suggested the conspiracy was even more elaborate than they had initially realized. It became clear that Eleanor Whitmore had been carefully cultivating relationships with other palace staff members, particularly those who shared any level of dissatisfaction with royal protocols or working conditions. She had been subtly gathering information about security procedures, the layout of restricted areas, and the schedules of senior staff members. Thomas found himself playing an increasingly important role in the investigation. His knowledge of palace security routines and his ability to move through different areas without arousing suspicion made him valuable for gathering additional evidence. However, the psychological pressure of the situation was enormous. "Mitchell," Superintendent Williams said during one of their daily briefings, "I want you to understand how crucial your discovery has been. Without your thoroughness in investigating the Queen's wardrobe room, this plot could very well have succeeded." The praise was gratifying, but Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing important pieces of the puzzle. The hidden coronation outfit was clearly just one element of a larger plan, and he was convinced that other aspects of the conspiracy had yet to be uncovered. His instincts proved to be correct when Margaret made another disturbing discovery. While reviewing the guest lists for various coronation-related events, she identified several individuals who had no apparent legitimate reason to be attending, but who shared connections to the same political dissident network that had recruited Eleanor Whitmore. "They've been planning to infiltrate the actual ceremony," Margaret announced during an emergency meeting. "We're not just dealing with symbolic sabotage. They may have been planning some kind of disruption during the coronation itself." The implications were staggering. The coronation ceremony would be attended by heads of state from around the world, senior government officials, and members of the royal family. Any kind of disruption could have consequences that went far beyond simple embarrassment for the monarchy. "What kind of disruption do you think they were planning?" Thomas asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Margaret's research had revealed fragments of communications between members of the dissident network, and while much of their planning remained hidden, certain elements had become clear. It appears they were planning what they call a moment of truth, some kind of dramatic revelation or action that would expose what they consider to be the illegitimate foundations of royal authority. The phrase "moment of truth" sent chills through everyone in the room. In the context of a live, internationally broadcast ceremony, such a moment could create chaos and potentially endanger the safety of everyone present. As they worked to piece together the remaining elements of the conspiracy, Thomas found himself thinking about the magnificent outfit that had started this entire investigation. The craftsmanship and attention to detail represented months of work by someone who was clearly passionate about their cause, however misguided it might be. "I keep wondering," Thomas said during one of their planning sessions, "about the person who actually created that outfit. The level of skill and artistry is extraordinary. It seems like such a waste to use that talent for something destructive." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually an important observation, Mr. Mitchell. The outfit represents a significant investment of time, resources, and expertise. For the conspirators to have commissioned something of that quality, they must have been very confident in their ability to successfully implement their plan." This realization was both comforting and troubling. It suggested that the conspirators had put enormous effort into planning their operation, which meant they probably had detailed backup plans and multiple contingencies. However, it also suggested that they might have been overconfident, which could create opportunities for the palace security team to anticipate and counter their actions. "What's our next step?" Thomas asked, feeling the weight of responsibility for protecting not just the Queen, but the institution of the monarchy itself. Superintendent Williams was reviewing the latest intelligence reports from MI5 and other security agencies. "We're going to set a trap," he announced. "We're going to let it be known through discreet channels that we've discovered the hidden outfit but haven't yet identified the conspirators. With any luck, this will force them to accelerate their timeline and make mistakes that will help us identify and apprehend them." The plan was risky, but it offered their best chance of uncovering the full scope of the conspiracy before the coronation ceremony. Thomas looked at the faces of his colleagues and realized that the next few days would determine whether their investigation would be remembered as a triumph of palace security or a catastrophic failure that changed the course of British history. The hidden coronation outfit had been just the beginning of a mystery that reached deep into the foundations of the monarchy itself. Now it was up to them to ensure that the Queen's coronation would proceed safely and successfully, despite the elaborate efforts of those who sought to undermine it. The plan to set a trap for the remaining conspirators required careful coordination with multiple security agencies and palace departments. Thomas found himself at the center of an operation that was unlike anything he had ever experienced during his years as a palace guard. The responsibility was enormous, and the margin for error was essentially zero. 3 days before the coronation ceremony, Superintendent Williams implemented the first phase of their strategy. Working with Margaret Hartley, they began spreading carefully controlled information through palace staff channels, suggesting that security had discovered some kind of irregularity in the Queen's wardrobe room, but hadn't yet determined its significance. "The key," Superintendent Williams explained during a briefing with Thomas and the other members of their small investigative team, "is to make the conspirators believe that we're close to discovering their plan without letting them know exactly how much we already know." Thomas had been assigned a particularly delicate role in this operation. As the guard who had originally discovered the hidden outfit, he was positioned to appear as though he was continuing to investigate the matter while being unaware of its full significance. This meant acting naturally while being constantly alert for any signs that the conspirators were taking the bait. The palace was a hive of activity as the final preparations for the coronation proceeded. Florists were arranging elaborate displays throughout the state rooms, caterers were preparing for the reception that would follow the ceremony, and security personnel were conducting their final reviews of all protocols and procedures. In the midst of all this legitimate activity, Thomas knew that somewhere among the staff, the conspirators were watching and waiting for their opportunity to act. On the second day of their trap operation, Margaret made contact with a crucial source of information. Dame Patricia Thornfield, who had served as a lady-in-waiting to the previous Queen and maintained extensive contacts throughout the royal household staff, had agreed to discreetly monitor conversations among the palace employees. "There's definitely something happening," Dame Patricia reported during a secure meeting in Margaret's office. "I've noticed increased tension among certain members of the household staff, and there have been several whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. This information confirmed that their strategy was working, but it also meant that they were entering the most dangerous phase of the operation. If the conspirators were becoming nervous, they might accelerate their timeline or implement backup plans that the security team hadn't anticipated. Thomas was conducting his regular patrol of the palace corridors when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Eleanor Whitmore, the dissident who was supposed to have disappeared, was walking calmly through the service corridors as if she had every right to be there. She was dressed in the standard palace staff uniform and appeared to be carrying cleaning supplies, but Thomas recognized her immediately from the photographs he had studied. Fighting every instinct that told him to immediately apprehend her, Thomas instead followed the predetermined protocol and discreetly contacted Superintendent Williams while maintaining visual surveillance of the suspect. The next few minutes felt like hours as he watched Eleanor move through the palace with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going and what she planned to do. "She's heading toward the Queen's private quarters," Thomas reported through his concealed radio. "She appears to have legitimate staff credentials and hasn't shown any awareness that she's being observed." The response from Superintendent Williams was immediate and decisive. "Maintain surveillance, but do not engage. We have teams moving into position, and we want to see what she's planning before we move." Thomas felt his heart racing as he followed Eleanor through corridors that he knew like the back of his hand. Her confidence was disturbing. She clearly believed that her disguise was effective and that her mission could still succeed despite the increased security presence throughout the palace. What happened next was both shocking and illuminating. Instead of heading directly to the Queen's wardrobe room as Thomas had expected, Eleanor made her way to a service area that housed the palace's elaborate ventilation and climate control systems. This was an area that most staff members rarely visited, and her presence there could only mean that the conspirators had plans that went far beyond simply substituting one outfit for another. "She's accessing the building systems," Thomas reported, watching as Eleanor used what appeared to be legitimate maintenance credentials to enter the restricted area. "This isn't about clothing anymore. They're planning something that involves the palace infrastructure." The realization that the conspiracy was more elaborate than anyone had imagined sent shockwaves through the security team. If the dissidents had access to the palace's building systems, they could potentially disrupt everything from lighting and sound systems during the ceremony to the security systems that protected the royal family. Superintendent Williams made the decision to move immediately. "All units were going active. Apprehend the suspect and secure the area. This is no longer a surveillance operation." Thomas found himself at the center of a coordinated security response that involved more than a dozen palace guards and several plainclothes agents from MI5. As they moved to surround the service area where Eleanor had disappeared, he couldn't help but feel that they were still missing crucial pieces of the conspiracy puzzle. The apprehension of Eleanor Whitmore was swift and professional, but her reaction was not what anyone had expected. Instead of showing surprise or attempting to resist, she simply smiled and said, "You're too late. The foundation has already been laid." Her cryptic words sent chills through everyone present, but it was what they discovered in her possession that truly alarmed the security team. Eleanor was carrying detailed blueprints of the palace's building systems, along with what appeared to be modification plans that would allow remote control of various building functions. "How long have you had access to these systems?" Superintendent Williams demanded during the initial interrogation. Eleanor's response was disturbing in its implications. "Long enough to ensure that the truth will be revealed during the coronation ceremony. The monarchy's foundations are built on lies, and the world will see that truth demonstrated in the most dramatic way possible." The interrogation revealed that the hidden coronation outfit had been only one element of a much more elaborate plan. The dissidents had been working for months to gain access to the palace's infrastructure systems, planning to use them to create what they called a moment of revelation during the ceremony itself. "What kind of revelation?" Margaret demanded, her years of loyalty to the crown evident in the anger she felt toward anyone who would threaten the institution she had served so faithfully. Eleanor's answer was chilling in its specificity. "The lights will fail at the moment of crowning, plunging the ceremony into darkness that symbolizes the moral darkness at the heart of the monarchy. In that darkness, The truth about royal illegitimacy will be projected onto the walls of the abbey for all the world to see. The scope of the plan was staggering. The conspirators had intended to hijack one of the most important ceremonies in British history, turning it into a platform for their political message. The international embarrassment would have been enormous, and the damage to the monarchy's reputation could have lasted for generations. But Alina's confident demeanor suggested that even her apprehension might not have completely derailed the conspiracy. "You've caught me," she said with disturbing calm, "but you haven't caught the plan. There are others who share our commitment to exposing the truth, and they will ensure that our message is heard." This revelation meant that the security team's work was far from over. With less than 24 hours before the coronation ceremony, they needed to identify and neutralize any remaining conspirators while also securing all of the palace systems that had been potentially compromised. Thomas found himself working alongside technical experts from MI5 and the palace maintenance staff as they conducted a comprehensive review of all building systems. What they discovered was evidence of sophisticated tampering that would have allowed remote control of lighting, sound, and even some security systems during the ceremony. "They've been planning this for months," one of the technical experts reported. "The modifications are extremely sophisticated and would have been almost impossible to detect during routine maintenance checks." The discovery of the technical sabotage led to an intensive search for additional conspirators among the palace staff. Using the information obtained from Alina's interrogation and cross-referencing it with employment records and access logs, the security team was able to identify 3 additional individuals who had been working to support the conspiracy. Each arrest revealed new aspects of the plot, painting a picture of a sophisticated operation that had required extensive planning, significant resources, and detailed inside knowledge of palace operations. The conspirators had infiltrated multiple departments and had been carefully positioning themselves for maximum impact during the coronation ceremony. "The scary thing," Thomas said during one of the briefings, "is how close they came to succeeding. If I hadn't found that outfit in the wardrobe room, we might never have discovered the conspiracy until it was too late." Margaret nodded gravely. "That's exactly right, Mr. Mitchell. Your thoroughness and attention to detail may very well have saved the monarchy from one of the most sophisticated attacks it has ever faced." As the final preparations for the coronation continued, the security team worked around the clock to ensure that all traces of the conspiracy had been eliminated. Every system was tested multiple times, every access point was secured, and every remaining staff member was carefully vetted. The irony was not lost on anyone involved that the beautiful coronation outfit that had started the investigation was actually a masterpiece of craftsmanship that had been corrupted for political purposes. The skill and artistry that had gone into its creation represented the kind of talents that could have contributed positively to the ceremony if they had been applied for legitimate purposes. "It's a shame," Thomas observed as he looked at the outfit one final time before it was secured as evidence. "Someone with that level of talent could have created something truly magnificent for the actual ceremony instead of wasting their skills on something destructive." With 12 hours remaining before the coronation ceremony was scheduled to begin, Superintendent Williams called a final security briefing. "Gentlemen and Mrs. Hartley, I want to thank you all for your exceptional work in uncovering and neutralizing this threat. Tomorrow's ceremony will proceed as planned, and the Queen will be crowned safely thanks to your dedication and professionalism." Thomas felt a profound sense of accomplishment, but also a lingering awareness of how close they had come to disaster. The hidden coronation outfit had led them to uncover a conspiracy that could have changed the course of British history, and he was proud to have played a role in protecting the institution he had sworn to serve. As he prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most important day of his career as a palace guard, Thomas reflected on how his life had changed since that morning when he had first discovered the hidden panel in the Queen's wardrobe room. He was no longer just a simple guard. He had become a protector of history itself. The morning of the coronation ceremony dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Buckingham Palace and casting everything in a warm, almost magical glow. For Thomas Mitchell, the day represented the culmination of the most intense and important week of his entire life. As he put on his dress uniform and prepared for what would be the most significant security operation he had ever participated in, He could hardly believe how dramatically his life had changed since that seemingly routine investigation in the Queen's wardrobe room. The palace was alive with controlled energy as hundreds of staff members, security personnel, and protocol officials worked together to ensure that every aspect of the ceremony would proceed flawlessly. The events of the past week had added an extra layer of tension to an already complex operation, but there was also a sense of confidence that came from knowing they had successfully neutralized a serious threat to the monarchy. Superintendent Williams had assembled his security team in the main briefing room for a final review of the day's protocols. The faces around the table represented some of the most experienced and dedicated security professionals in the country, and Thomas felt honored to be counted among them. "Today," the superintendent announced, "we have the privilege of protecting not just Her Majesty the Queen, but the institution of the monarchy itself. The events of this past week have shown us that there are those who would use even the most sacred ceremonies to advance their political agendas. But we have proven that dedication, professionalism, and attention to detail can overcome even the most sophisticated threats." As the briefing concluded, Thomas found himself assigned to a position that would allow him to observe the ceremony while maintaining security oversight of the areas where the conspiracy had been discovered. It was a position of enormous responsibility, and he was determined to ensure that nothing would mar the historic significance of the day. Margaret Hartley had spent the early morning hours making final inspections of the Queen's ceremonial preparations. The official coronation dress, which had been created under the most stringent security conditions, was a masterpiece of traditional British craftsmanship. In contrast to the hidden outfit that had started their investigation, this legitimate dress told a story of continuity, tradition, and the sacred nature of monarchical authority. "It's beautiful," Thomas said when Margaret showed him the official coronation regalia. "It represents everything that the hidden outfit was trying to corrupt." Margaret nodded, her years of service to the crown evident in the pride she felt as she looked at the magnificent garments. "This is what true royal ceremony should look like, a celebration of history, tradition, and the sacred bond between the monarchy and the people." As the morning progressed, dignitaries began arriving at Westminster Abbey for the ceremony. Heads of state from around the world, senior government officials, and members of the royal family all gathered to witness what would be one of the most important events in British history. The security operation required to protect such a gathering was enormous, and Thomas was awed by the level of coordination required to ensure everyone's safety. Dame Patricia Thornfield, who had played such a crucial role in helping to uncover the conspiracy, was among the ladies-in-waiting who would assist the Queen during the ceremony. As she passed Thomas's security position, she paused to speak with him. "Mr. Mitchell," she said with genuine warmth, "I want you to know how grateful I am for your dedication during this difficult time. Your discovery and the investigation that followed may have prevented one of the greatest scandals in modern royal history." The ceremony itself was everything that royal occasions are meant to be: majestic, moving, and deeply symbolic. As Thomas watched from his security position, he was struck by the contrast between the beauty and solemnity of the actual event and the chaos that the conspirators had planned to create. The hidden coronation outfit had been designed to corrupt this sacred moment, but instead, the legitimate ceremony proceeded with a grace and dignity that seemed to vindicate everything the monarchy represented. When the Archbishop of Canterbury placed the crown on the Queen's head, Thomas felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The moment was being broadcast to millions of people around the world, and instead of witnessing the moment of truth that the conspirators had planned, they were seeing the successful continuation of a tradition that stretched back over 1,000 years. The technical systems that the conspirators had attempted to sabotage worked perfectly throughout the ceremony. The lighting remained steady and appropriate. The sound systems carried the Archbishop's words clearly to every corner of the Abbey, and the security systems maintained their vigilant watch over everyone present. The sophisticated modifications that Eleanor Whitmore and her colleagues had made to the palace infrastructure had been completely neutralized, and their elaborate plan had been reduced to nothing more than a failed conspiracy that would be remembered only by those who had worked to stop it. After the ceremony concluded, and the immediate security concerns had been addressed, Thomas found himself reflecting on the extraordinary week that had led to this moment. The investigation that had begun with his discovery of a hidden panel in the Queen's wardrobe room had ultimately protected the monarchy from one of the most sophisticated attacks it had ever faced. Superintendent Williams approached him as he was completing his final security report for the day. "Mitchell, I want to speak with you about your future with Palace Security. Your work this week has been exemplary, and there are opportunities for advancement that I think you should consider." The prospect of career advancement was gratifying, but Thomas found that his feelings about his work had changed in ways that went beyond simple professional ambition. The experience of protecting something as important as the coronation ceremony had given him a deeper appreciation for the significance of his role as a palace guard. "Sir," Thomas replied, "I'm honored by the opportunity, but I have to say that this week has taught me that sometimes the most important security work happens in the quiet moments, during routine investigations that turn out to be anything but routine." Margaret Hartley joined their conversation, carrying with her a small package wrapped in elegant paper. "Mr. Mitchell, I have something for you from Her Majesty herself. She wanted to express her personal gratitude for your role in protecting the coronation ceremony." The package contained a pair of silver cufflinks engraved with the royal coat of arms, along with a handwritten note from the Queen thanking him for his dedication, vigilance, and service to the crown. Thomas was overwhelmed by the personal recognition from the monarch he had sworn to protect. "I never expected anything like this," Thomas said, examining the beautiful cufflinks with amazement. "I was just doing my job." "That's exactly the point," Margaret replied with a smile. "You were doing your job with the kind of thoroughness and attention to detail that makes the difference between success and failure in situations like this. Her Majesty recognizes that your discovery prevented what could have been a catastrophic embarrassment for the monarchy." As the day drew to a close and the palace began to return to its normal rhythms, Thomas took one final walk through the corridors where the investigation had unfolded. The Queen's wardrobe room, where everything had begun, was once again secure and peaceful. The hidden panel had been permanently sealed, and the room had been restored to its original magnificence. The hidden coronation outfit itself had been moved to a secure location where it would be held as evidence in the legal proceedings against the conspirators. Despite its subversive intentions, the outfit remained a testament to extraordinary craftsmanship, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a certain sadness that such talent had been misdirected toward destructive purposes. Eleanor Whitmore and her fellow conspirators were in custody facing charges that could result in significant prison sentences. Their elaborate plan to corrupt the coronation ceremony had failed completely, but the investigation had revealed the extent to which determined individuals could penetrate even the most secure institutions if they were willing to invest sufficient time and resources in their efforts. "The scary thing," Thomas said to Margaret as they reviewed the final reports, "is how close they came to succeeding. If I had been less thorough in my investigation, or if I had dismissed the hidden panel as unimportant, they might have pulled off one of the most spectacular acts of political sabotage in modern history." Margaret nodded gravely. "That's a sobering reminder of how important every aspect of palace security really is. The routine investigations, the attention to detail, the willingness to follow up on seemingly minor anomalies, all of these things matter more than most people realize." As Thomas prepared to leave the palace at the end of this historic day, he reflected on how the discovery of the hidden coronation outfit had changed not just the course of the week's events, but his own understanding of his role as a guardian of British institutions. The simple act of investigating unusual sounds in the Queen's wardrobe room had led to the uncovering of a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of the monarchy. The coronation ceremony had proceeded flawlessly. The Queen had been crowned with the dignity and solemnity that the occasion deserved, and the world had witnessed a celebration of continuity and tradition, rather than the moment of chaos and revelation that the conspirators had planned. The hidden outfit that had been intended to steal hearts through subversion had instead led to a triumph of security and dedication that would protect the monarchy for generations to come. Walking home through the streets of London, where people were still celebrating the successful coronation ceremony, Thomas carried with him the knowledge that he had played a crucial role in protecting one of the most important events in his nation's history. The beautiful but sinister outfit hidden in the Queen's wardrobe had been meant to corrupt the sacred ceremony of coronation, but instead, it had become the catalyst for a security operation that demonstrated the strength and resilience of the institutions it had sought to destroy. The guards' unexpected find in the Queen's wardrobe had indeed uncovered a coronation outfit that was intended to steal hearts, but not in the way its creators had planned. Instead of stealing hearts through the subversion of royal ceremony, it had stolen hearts through the revelation of the dedication, skill, and integrity of those who protect the crown. The true victory belonged not to those who sought to corrupt tradition, but to those who worked tirelessly to preserve it for future generations.